Back this year marks the 100th anniversary of the University of Fort Hare. We now take a look back and remind you of how the 80th anniversary was celebrated.
I love Fort Hare.
I remain indebted for all time to Fort Hare.
Going to Fort Hare was really, in a way, a very carefree time, but also a very serious time.
I still believe that I'm part and parcel of this university.
The University of Fort Hare is the university of my dream.
Fort Hare really was a very, very special place in the sense that I don't think that anyone could stay there and be the same after staying there, especially as far as being sensitized to the problems that face black people and the oppression of black people generally.
It was fantastic. I can never forget Fort Hare. I've come here to look at the old places where I used to win. The cross country I used to win.
The greatest thing that has ever happened to me in my lifetime is coming to Fort Hare University. I think Fort Hare has made me.
Fort Hare is a people's university with a long history and culture of learning as well as resistance, but also with a long history of its people that have learned to survive. And today we are a celebration of that survival.
It gives me great pleasure to be here. When the visionaries to whom we owe the establishment of Fort Hare University conceived of its need in the 19th century and nursed it into reality 80 years ago, they had great hopes for what it would achieve. They knew that such a university for Africans was sorely needed in a country and a region whose rulers had scant interest in the school education of the majority they ruled.
Fort Hare starts in 1916. And I got to Fort Hare as a student in 1932. Those days we did matric at Fort Hare. The Fort Hare came about as an idea. Would you call them idealists? Or would you call them men of vision? Or would you call them dreamers?
Fort Hare came as an idea because they started talking around Fort Hare and about Fort Hare, about setting up a tertiary institution shortly after the Anglo-Boer War. African leaders of the time thought there should be a tertiary institution established for Africans. Because what would it mean, in effect? It meant for everyone who passed matric, if he or she wanted to proceed beyond matric, it meant going overseas to Edinburgh and other institutions of learning way back in England. And they felt that there should be such an institution in South Africa.
I didn't have to choose to go to Fort Hare because it was the only educational institution which offered degrees for Africans in this country. We could not be admitted in any other university in the country, so there was no choice. If you wanted to be a graduate and you didn't have sufficient resources to go overseas, Fort Hare was the only alternative. So it was not really a choice as much as it was necessity. That is how I came to Fort Hare. But Fort Hare has a particular significance in that it was not an ethnic university. At first, around about 1916, it also accepted white students. And it also accepted students from all over Southern Africa. And even as far as Central Africa, Uganda. People like Professor Lule, the late Professor Lule, who became the Prime Minister of Uganda for a short time, is a product of this university. And Prime Minister Seretse of Botswana is a product of this university. And of course, you now have President Mugabe. But you have many people who occupied very senior positions in the government of their countries, who are the products of Fort Hare. Premier Ntsu Mokhehle, Prime Minister Ntsu Mokhehle of Lesotho, is a product of this university. So Fort Hare has that significance. It trained the leaders who played an important role in the liberation movement in this country. That, I think, is one of its greatest contributions.
Anyone who wanted to pursue his or her secondary education had to go down south. And that's why many of us during those days who had sponsorship or had parental support went to South Africa, to places like Adams College, Marion Hill, many others in South Africa. Tiger Clovis one, Lovedale another. I went to Fort Hare, 51, to complete my degree. Then it ran degrees which were examinable by the University of South Africa in Pretoria. And when I got there in 1950, it was still under the sponsorship or tutelage, if you want, of the University of South Africa. Then, because of the nearness to Rhodes in Grahamstown, it was considered that an association with Grahamstown would be better for the college. And the college only gave degrees in arts and science at the time. A Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts, and you could improve on these and get master's degrees. But there were no other degrees. These were introduced later, hence it remained a college. In 1950, at the end of 50, or during 1950, the changeover from the University of South Africa to the University of Rhodes was then completed. And by the time I completed my degree, it was a Rhodes degree. So I got a Rhodes degree like Ian Smith, who went to Rhodes directly. So we were linked with Rhodes one way or another, to both of us.
When I was at Fort Hare, I was with people from Malawi, people from Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and so on. And many of them had come from that kind of situation where, for example, I think there was a gentleman from Botswana who came to Fort Hare after the community had sold cattle in order to send him to Fort Hare. And became one of the illustrious people of his society. And so communities really did play a great role. There was also the encouragement. I remember whenever you went off, when you came back on holiday, you went through the community to go and greet every auntie and every grandma to see how you are doing and to make sure that you don't get your head in the clouds and be proud.
If I didn't have a bursary, I wouldn't have been able to go to university. My father was not all that rich to be able to afford me going to university. So, but he contributed towards it, but the bursary helped a lot too. And the bursary came from, of course, the government of what was then Natal, but also, of course, from the communities who contributed towards the education fund, education bursary. So it was a community sort of support. And I knew too, when I was at university, that I came from a poor community. I came from a fairly close-knit community that expected something out of me when I got back home. It was a pride of the district where I lived in to know that there are, at that time, when I went to university, there had only been in that district no more than about 2 or 3 graduates in the whole district. So I knew that there was a heavy burden that lay on me as I went over there. There were great expectations from the community. I couldn't fail the community.
As we said in later years, when I became a senior student involved in student politics, we used to say Fort Hare had been turning out black Englishmen because those English was the thing. And we started revolutionizing, as it were, Fort Hare from inside, changing it. In the first place, that students should not major in English. They should look for other subjects, economics and so on, and other subjects. But it took time to do that. Now, Fort Hare, we found students from all the surrounding territories: Swaziland, Lesotho, Botswana, Zimbabwe, studying at Fort Hare. The children of the elite in the whole sub-Saharan area studied at Fort Hare. And as we used to be told then, which I've had occasion to correct with my later knowledge of Latin, we used to be told that you are taught to be leaders. Fort Hare was not established in order to lead the students or to teach its students in revolutionary methods. This is something which the students acquire themselves in the course of their studies. And students from the sub-Saharan area qualified, went back, and when they went back leaving Fort Hare, they had gathered as much as the South African students had gathered from Fort Hare. The likes of Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela, and others. They had gathered information which they put together to assist them to determine what to do in order to bring about liberation for their own people.
A lot of discussion, a lot of reading. We had Gandhi mainly as a figure, a revolutionary figure whose ideas we could adopt and whose actions we also could follow, and so politically that was the thinking for some of us who were political. And not every student was necessarily political, even those coming from what was Southern Rhodesia or Northern Rhodesia or Nyasaland at the time. But those of us who were political had to read a lot about Gandhi, his biography, Nehru also. But the senior students or the leaders of the ANC Youth League put across these ideas very forcefully. We discussed all this. And there was discussion also of the ANC, the old leadership, which many felt was submissive and not sufficiently thrustful, not sufficiently aggressive, not sufficiently revolutionary. And the young students felt, who were ANC, felt no, there had to be a change of leadership. There had to be a change of leadership. And because of that, the students at Fort Hare, who were ANC, felt it was their responsibility to infuse into the whole aging leadership, they thought, some action, some degree of action, so that there is a departure from the old method of meeting with authorities and getting promises which were never fulfilled, but now people would pave their way to freedom. If India could do it, why could we not? And there was talk of using even stones to get our freedom.
In 1948, we formed a branch of the African National Congress Youth League. I served in that committee of the Youth League under the chairmanship of an illustrious black South African called Mangaliso Sobukwe. And I sat in that little committee with Prince Mtwana Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who were big buddies. He was much younger than I was.
Fort Hare was a very politically active place, so if you had come from a background where it wasn't that way, you really got steeped into the politics and high politics, people reading all kinds of books and so on.
Even though politics was banned at college, we had our political classes in those classrooms at Fort Hare. We met virtually every Sunday to have discussions and to have certain people who were tutors to us, teaching us about the basic things about Africa as such. I know we read about Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe and his philosophy, which we called Zikism. This had nothing to do with chemistry, but we learned it. We read books. We had exposure, so it was a very broad type of education that we got at Fort Hare, for which I'm very thankful.
There wasn't a lot of tension. I mean, the kind of tension that developed later actually surprised me, because at Fort Hare, for instance, where the Soya, the students of Young Africa, who were sort of communist-oriented, we read the newspaper The Torch, which was their publication, which, I mean, although they wrote very scurrilous things, you know, about our leaders in the ANC then, but naturally there was a lot of tolerance.
When I left Fort Hare, and I was not the only one, there were others as well, I mean, from what was Southern Rhodesia then, I made up my mind that once home, I must join in the struggle against colonial rule in this country. When I had not known Mandela, except from papers and what was published of him during the ANC days, when the ANC was transforming itself into a revolutionary body. We met in Addis Ababa. I asked him whether he was going back to South Africa and whether the people of South Africa would be happy to see him rest. He said, "No, my brother, I have a mission. Those who sent me want me to go back to report to them." And he found his way back. He had left South Africa his own devious way, and he had to go back again using that devious way, possibly through Botswana, etc. But sooner or later, the inimical forces of law and order at the time caught up with him, and there was that long trial and his imprisonment, which was going to last as long as 27 years. But that did not break him. And this is what you find in all those who had gone through Fort Hare: commitment to principle, commitment to, the revolution. You couldn't go back merely because you've been arrested, merely because you have suffered incarceration for that long. In fact, imprisonment and detention tended to strengthen you in your resolve. True, you did feel for your own family, you did feel for your children, etc. But at the end of the day, you say to yourself, but yes, my own son died when I was in prison. But then I looked at others. I saw, next to me was a person whose father had just died, and so on. Relatives had died, and they were prisoners with me. Then I say to myself, my situation is no worse. We share this in common. And it was to be expected these things would happen. So that strengthened you in your resolve. But afterwards, in retrospect now, when colonialism has been defeated, apartheid has been defeated, we'll look back and say, this is what we fought for. True, we are not together with those who died in the struggle, but those of us who have remained to see it, we feel that we suffered for this real, I don't know what to call it, but you couldn't get it any other way without. It's not a gift. It's an objective that you had to fight for and sacrifice for. So we have that background. It makes us see things the same way.
Fort Hare is great, my dear friend. Fort Hare is great.